Okay, we're going to try again here. We were kicked off a few minutes ago. We're going to try again to take the show for Monday, and we're back again here to do the program live. We've been away for the last month. I was in Africa for the last 4 weeks and came back last week, and very excited to be back home and looking forward to a good program. A good program we're taping live today. I put a couple of programs in the bank, so to speak, before I left, and hopefully you were staying tuned while I was gone. But I stayed in Africa mainly during the 4 weeks I was going out of the country by way of Brussels, Belgium. Got a couple of friends in Belgium. And then from there to Dakar, Senegal. And then from Dakar, the capital of Senegal, from there to Banjul, which is the capital of Gambia. And you might know Gambia more than you know the other countries in Africa, because Gambia is where Alex Haley, the one that authored the novel, I want to stress it was a novel called Roots, and his claim was that he had traced his roots back all the way across 300 years of time from the present, which he was tracing his roots back in the 70s, 1970s, supposedly back to the tribe in Gambia, the Jufre tribe, or the ethnic group in Gambia, in the Jufre village. And if you remember correctly, back in that time period, it aired, I think it was the first miniseries. In fact, it was the first miniseries that aired on a national station in the United States, because that program aired for 12 hours. And everybody was running home to watch Roots, and some great, as if they had made some great discovery of Alice Haley's roots, and they're going to trace their roots back and heritage back to Africa. And it caught on fire, and some of the others picked up on it. Professor Gates picked up on it at Harvard University, and he's now doing. He's been doing a lot of things, supposedly tracing people's roots back to different places, starting here and going back into the record books, and claiming that he's found the roots of Oprah and some of the others and things of that sort. It's so laughable if you've been over there to see the landscape for yourself, because it's almost like them saying that over the course of 300 years, nobody moved anywhere. You're just sitting there waiting. You're just sitting there waiting for Kunti Kinte. That's the person who Alex Haley claimed was his ancestor, going back into the alleged kidnapping. I mean, this is the novel is the airing of this is laughable, because people forget that this is a novel, it's not a historical record. And this idea of Kunti Kinte being the ancestor way back when, 300 years ago, somewhere in the 18th century, would have been the ancestor. Alice Haley is tracing his roots back to Kunti Kinte, and then from there coming through all these other figures all the way up to the present time period, where you have his family and so on and so forth in the United States, picking up at the point he is authoring the book, the autobiography of Malcolm X, which I consider also to be a novel, because the book that he wrote supposedly on the autobiography of Malcolm X was mostly a book that Alex Haley had chiseled out from the fact that Malcolm X wanted to change a lot of that book once he had been ousted from the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm wanted to change that book. He going back through it now, and since he is no longer the Nation of Islam, he wanted to change some of the things he had said earlier when he was a member of the Nation of Islam. And I remember reading that he sent Malcolm X was sent the Gather proofs of the autobiography of Malcolm X, and when the book came back, the Gather proofs came back in the manuscript, and he sent it back to Alex Haley. All all that read Malcolm was crossing out all the almost all the autobiography in the earlier stages of it. The part where he had been converted to the Nation of Islam while in prison. All that Malcolm was drawing lines for all of that because he had a different view of it. Now that he had gone out of the Nation of Islam, been put out of the Nation of Islam in 1963. A lot of different angles that you have to be able to understand of what's going on during this time period. But going over to Africa and then claiming that you were able to trace your roots back to a village, and Haley claiming he had traced his roots back to the Jufure village. And it's almost like them saying that the village where Kunta Kinte came out of, the people that are sitting there waiting for his ancestors to come back to the continent and reclaim their roots over there as if nobody ever moved anywhere. And that's such a false notion. You go and read, if those of you who saw the movie called Amistad, you go and see that Q, which was the Spanish name of the person from Sierra Leone, they had been kidnapped in 1839, and 3 years later, when he went back, you saw the movie, so you know that the sixth president of the sixth president of the United States, who at that time was the member of the House of Representatives, because after I'm talking about John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams. Once he had been turned out of office as president, he ran as member of the House, but he was the attorney for the group on the Amistad, who were claiming that they had been kidnapped illegally because the slave trade had been outlawed, and they had been kidnapped in the post slave trade period. The slave trade had been outlawed, and they'd been kidnapped in the aftermath of that, and they had to prove that they were not Spanish, and they were not enslaved by the Spanish, but they were enslaved illegally before the slave trade. In the aftermath of the slave trade being outlawed, they had been enslaved after that, and therefore they should be free. That's going in the courts of the United States during this time period. In fact, that trial is what led to the defeat of the eighth president of the United States, Martin Van Buren, because it created a real storm. And I think Martin Van Buren's defeat can be attributed to that court case, because it created such a backlash. They come to the United States and so on, and created a backlash, and Martin Van Buren took a lot of the heat for it. And I think that's what led to Martin Van Buren's defeat in 1840. Well, Martin Van Buren was elected, first of all, in 1836 in the aftermath of Andrew Jackson. It's a lot of different angles you can go, you can attach to what is going on during that time period and what's happening right now. Because in this time period, we were crisscrossing each other. That's to say, I was going to Africa during this time period, and the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was coming over here to the United States during the time period I was in Africa. And I know very well the politics of South Africa, because I was there when Ramaphosa was inaugurated in 2018. That was my second time in South Africa. I happened to be there when Ramaphosa became the fifth of the ANC leaders, the African National Congress leaders, the fifth of the ANC leaders to be the president of South Africa in the post-apartheid period. Mandela being the first of the ANC leaders, and the first of the Hassa leaders of South Africa, because all of the post-apartheid leaders in South Africa have been Hassa, or have been ANC members. It's a lot of things we need to really bring into the context of that visit by Ramaphosa, because Ramaphosa is the fifth ANC leader, and I think he's probably the one that's in the most hot water of all the leaders that they've had. But this idea of the rainbow coalition that Mandela talked about, some rainbow, because you try and unite these ethnic. You're not just trying to unite at that point in Mandela's rule of the Boers and the British in South Africa and the blacks as a polity in South Africa. You got to now talk about the uniting of those ethnic groups in South Africa. All of them, all the majority of them being black, not the British and the Boers, the Dutch, for sure. But there's a lot of friction going on in South Africa between the ethnic groups that are black in South Africa, and the Hausa being the second of the largest group, of which Ramaphosa is a member of the Hausa, and that's who has been running South Africa in the post-apartheid period. But there's a lot of friction in South Africa. And when I was there, in my first time I was there was 2009, and I tried to, I don't say one, but I did say to one of the ministers there that they were making the same mistake in South Africa that they had made in Haiti in the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution in the 1790s under Toussaint Louverture. I was telling them, you're making the same mistake in South Africa that blacks made in Haiti, and the same mistake that Mugabe made in what is now called Zimbabwe, but earlier was called Southern Rhodesia, because Southern Rhodesia was renamed Zimbabwe um, when they ousted Ian Smith and put in Mugabe as the president. And so that period of history, I was trying to point out to one of the ministers in South Africa during that time period. It almost turned into a shouting match. He was shouting. I didn't have to shout. I was telling him that you're making the same mistake in South Africa that they made in Haiti, from which Haiti has never recovered from that, and the same mistake that Mugabe made in what became Zimbabwe, and they have not recovered from what happened in the aftermath of the rule of Ian Smith, who was the leader of Southern Rhodesia when Mugabe took over, and that failed. And Zimbabwe is another failed state in Africa, and now so is South Africa a failed state. And the danger in South Africa, covered up by the media, as they were focusing on Donald Trump. They made, in Ramaphosa's visit to America, they made the visit about Donald Trump, not about Ramaphosa. There was a cover-up going on. I could see it because I know a lot about the situation in South Africa, and I knew what they were doing was covering up what is happening in South Africa. The reason Ramaphosa was over here, by the way, was because uh, Trump has looked in what's happening in South Africa with the whites in South Africa being targeted, and what Donald Trump did to put pressure on the South African government was cut off the $300 million of aid they're getting from the United States and cut that aid off. And Ramaphosa was over here to try to plead his cause of that, that they are in fact trying to rectify the problem they have with the minority populations that they have there. But they have a number of minority populations in South Africa. Not all of them are racial. Most of the ethnic minority groups in South Africa are ethnic. Once you get past the Hausa, which is the second largest of the ethnic groups in South Africa, and then the Zulu, which is the largest of the groups in South Africa. The ethnic groups, their ethnic divisions are real in South Africa. And when you talk about the Rainbow Coalition, I don't know what kind of rainbow is going to be, with every group trying to hold on to its own ethnic background and not willing to compromise the integrity of their own group. That's a real problem throughout Africa. I wanted to call your attention to something else now that I'm on this point, and that is there's a person in South Africa making a lot of noise on that continent right now, a person by the name of Ibrahim Traore, Traore, in Burkina Faso. This man is a major figure on the world scene, and he went to a meeting of the Eastern Bloc of Nations, went to Russia and met with Eastern leaders. Yes, he met with a lot of Eastern leaders, and he met there with them not as a client, but as a partner. And he's putting a lot of pressure on African leaders, by the way, including Ramaphosa. A lot of pressure. Because unlike these other leaders in Africa who are over these failed states because they've been ruled by kleptomaniacs, and they've driven those countries into the ground in the post-colonial period. This is just not my understanding of it, but also the understanding of a person that went there that was from the United States and lived there a number of years he lived in Guinea. I'm talking here about the person you know as Stokely Carmichael, who changed his name to Kwame Ture. And he named himself after the great Pan-African leader in Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast. Ghana was formerly known as the Gold Coast until 1957, and became named after the Empire of Ghana back in the time period of the 15th century, when Ghana was in it. The Ghana Empire was in its ascendancy. So it took on the name Ghana of that, claiming that history, that more ancient history, and they took that name as a name of the Gold Coast. But I'm saying Carmichael, who came from here and stayed in Africa for a long period of time, took on the name of the first president of the post-colonial Ghana, or the Gold Coast as it was called before that. And he named himself after the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah had been educated in the United States, by the way, and had gone back to had been trained here, and was in the United States. He was in the West really from 1935 to 1947. He was in the West for 12 years, Western trained, but he went back, having met when he was here, met a number of Pan-African leaders. And I look at Traore today as a descendant, ideological descendant of those Pan-African leaders during that time period. Pan-African leaders such as the English-trained Kwame Nkrumah, and the French-trained in Guinea Conakry, who would be Sekou Touré. And Carmichael's name, I'm covering a lot of different things here, but I have to try to stop and make sure I'm being clear, because there are a lot of different things you can tie into what's going on with Ramaphosa, but you have to go and look at a number of other angles to what is transpiring, because there are a lot of reasons as to why Ramaphosa is over here pleading. He was over here pleading his case, because those attacks on those whites in South Africa is real. And I tried to say something about that when I was there in 2018, because I saw what was getting ready to happen. And what I said was about to happen, because I was looking at the energies that were in the country at that time. I was seeing I knew that the politics was such that the whites would be scapegoated because of the failure of the African leadership, the, the black African leadership in South Africa, including Mandela. You know, Mandela came out of prison and it was made the president of South Africa because he had become the galvanizing force behind the anti-apartheid movement, and in terms of having become the face of the anti-apartheid movement, Mandela then, while in prison, was doing negotiation with the apartheid regime, and when he came out, the idea would be that Mandela would become the president of South Africa because he was a galvanizing force while he was in prison. Understand the fact that that's true while he was in prison. But you go and look at this tape when Mandela came to the United States on a tour, on his freedom tour when he had been released from prison. He made a tour around the world. He came to the United States. I was there when he came to the United States. I was there at Detroit Stadium. And I was there, and I also saw him on Nightline when the leader of the Zulus, the largest group in South Africa, the largest of the ethnic groups in South Africa, called him by satellite, and he told Mandela, he said, "My brother, I've been calling you and calling you, and you will not return my call." And Mandela, first of all, chastised him for confronting him on foreign soil. He was in the United States now. He said that you raising this issue on while I'm on foreign soil. But then he said this, and very interestingly, he made this point, which went over people's head because they didn't understand the gratuity involved in it. He said, "But you know that the problem is no longer simple." And what he's alluding to at that point is that when he was in jail, everyone could unite around the incarceration of Mandela as an anti-apartheid figure. But it's the same problem that you have when you decolonize these countries. Gandhi had the same problem in India. Gandhi was a rallying point as long as the British were in control. When Gandhi was saying things like, he's walking to New Delhi, where the British government was situated in India, and he said, "I'm going there to tell the British that they're not in charge, we are in charge." Yeah, that's true. But who is that we were talking about? Some of them are Muslims. Pakistan, which was on the eastern coast of India. It was part of India at that point, but it broke away and now it's Pakistan. But that was part of India at that point. And when Gandhi had led to the independence of India through his nonviolent movement, the unity was 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 plastered together because of the fact that everybody was focused on getting the British off of Indian soil. But once that has occurred, though, what you have in the post-colonial period is the plastering of the groups together artificially under the regime of a foreign ruler on the soil that everybody's identified as a foreign ruler. But then once that has been attended to, then the frictions that are on the soil of the indigenous group then are brought to the surface. And how you, in fact, deal with that problem, we have not seen anyone do it well yet. And in South Africa, you're getting ready to see something, and pay attention to it very, very carefully, because when Ramaphosa was coming over here pleading his case, he is pleading his case to the president who took away the $300 million of aid that South Africa gets from the United States. And the president's putting pressure up on that regime, because that regime is, in fact, using those whites in South Africa as scapegoats, because South Africa has now joined the other community of states in Africa that are now failed states in Africa in the post-colonial period. Ibrahim Traore is making some noise over there because he is a leader that's trying to do something along the idea of Pan-African. Not that he's claiming to be Pan-African, but his vision is Pan-African. And he's putting a lot of pressure on African leaders because those kleptocrats in Africa are selling the resources of Africa and putting the money in their pocket. And what Traore is doing is, in fact, leveraging the resources in Burkina Faso for greater technology and understanding of technology, and making use of it in Burkina Faso, rather than simply selling the mineral wealth of the country and pocketing their money. This man is using it for the development of Burkina Faso, and that's putting a lot of pressure on the West and on Eastern countries also, and on countries in Africa as well, because this man is not playing any game. I was impressed, if I may say this. I was impressed that R. Kelly did a song. I heard it while I was in Africa, a song on Traore. I think he did it through AI. Did a video on this visionary leader, and people need to pay attention to what's going on there. Not so much on this noise being made by the media when Ramaphosa was here, because all that was nothing but a cover up. They focused on Trump and trying to make it appear that Trump was in fact not being respectful of Ramaphosa and so on and so forth. Trump is the only one that put a spotlight on what's really happening in South Africa. The only one that had the courage to put the spotlight on what's happening in South Africa, because South Africa is coming apart at the seams. It had the potential at its point of independence from the apartheid regime. It had potential to become the jewel of Africa. It's the only country in Africa that could have held the World Cup as it did in South Africa in 2010. I was in another part of Africa during that time period. And of course, we don't have the best of the soccer teams. We have our game is football. Another kind of, well, it's football. They call soccer football over there. But our thing is, our football is put your head down, run to the guy, knock him down, push him back. Their soccer is they had a they had a cartoon where they were showing the difference in how soccer is viewed and how our football is viewed, and they had soccer players wearing Cinderella type dresses, and then had the football players over here dressed as barbarians, because our football is like, knock them down, where the soccer is a little bit different. It's kind of like you finesse you go around the guy and so on and so forth. We're gonna go through you in football here. you go around the guy and you finessing the ball, and you can't even touch the ball with your hands and that kind of thing. And we it's kind of like a Cinderella kind of thing to us. We're more in our playing football. Theirs is more like a finesse. I was there when they played the soccer in South. I was there in Africa when they played. They had the World Cup in 2010, and I got ribbed all over the place because we don't have the best soccer team, and they were all want to remind me. I wanted to make they were joking with me about how we were playing against the what they call the Black Stars, which was a team in Ghana and things of that sort, all in fun. But no other country could have held the World Cup in Africa except South Africa. It had the potential of being the jewel of Africa. It's not that now. It's another failed state in Africa, and that posed tremendous problems for the minority groups in South Africa, not just the whites who are minorities in South Africa, but other groups that are minority groups there as well. And after you get past the Zulus and the Hassas, the other groups are minority groups in terms of that, because those are the two largest groups that you have. The two largest ethnic groups you have in South Africa are the Hassas. That's number two, and then Zulus are the largest group. And I have witnessed the. In fact, I saw the how they're trying to placate the ethnic tensions by the fact they recognize, if I recall correctly, 12 groups are recognized as official groups in the South African Constitution. And you ask yourself the question, why would the country recognize 12 different ethnic groups officially and their languages officially in the South African Constitution? And the answer is very simple. To do otherwise would have invited the tensions that are brewing under the surface to now surface, because every group, if their language is not recognized, but the Zulu language is recognized or the Hausa language is recognized, then other groups are going to be chomping at the bits, because that means then that their language is being excluded, and they're not going to accept that quietly. And that's why I was saying earlier that that's why you don't have any indigenous language spoken in the parliament in a single African country in Africa, with the exception of Somalia. And Somalia language is the Kiswahili, which is a hybrid language of indigenous African language and Arabic. And so that language is spoken in parliament in Somalia. But what do you think is the a parliamentary language in Senegal, for example, next door to where I was in Gambia? I was in Gambia, but Senegal surrounds Gambia, French speaking. And what language you think is the parliamentary language in Dakar, Senegal? French. When I was in Senegal, they were asking me in Senegal, why you know speak French? Because Leopold Senghor, the anti-colonial founder, the founding president of Senegal, spoke perfect French, metropolitan French. And that is a French-speaking nation because they were colonized by the French. But they do not dare put an indigenous language in the parliament in Dakar, because it'd be the same problem in Dakar they would have in South Africa if they use the other languages other than English in the parliament in South Africa. If you notice that when Ramaphosa came here, he was speaking English. He has another language, but the parliamentary language in South Africa is English. If it were not that, and you would have a calming of the environment, it would be the Dutch, because that would be another colonial language. But if you don't have the colonial languages, you have therefore the languages that are indigenous languages, and each of them will be chomping at the bit if their indigenous language is foregone to then placate another ethnic group whose language is being used. They dare not do that because that would create more friction. And we have to understand how Africa operates. If we understood that, we would not have fallen for this nonsense that they were pushing in the media when Ramaphosa was here. And I can see it from a mile from where I was because I saw what the press was in fact doing. I brought this book here to the studio as a way of showing what I consider it to be the unfreedom of the press. This book by Mark Levine, because we don't have a free press in this country. We don't even have and I don't even call it the fake news as it's called. I think we have a treasonous press in this country. This country has a press that is treasonous. That's why I brought this other book to the studio as well, and that's a book by Ann Coulter. I got around to reading this book when I was in Africa. This book came out in 1903. I finally got around to reading it. I had it on my shelf for a long time, and I finally got around to reading it when I was in Africa. I read 5 books when I was over there, and one of them was this book. Great book by the great. This woman is a great researcher, Ann Coulter. The book is called Treason. The subtitle is Treachery from the Cold War to the War on Terrorism. And this book, I read it late. I'm a Johnny come lately in reading it, but I can tell you this book is very excellent today, because that's what we're looking at in this country. This is what's going on in America today is treason. The press in this country is treasonous. I wrote a 4-part series on tying that in to my visit on the continent of Africa. I tied in this treason that's going on in this country to Ramaphosa's visit in this country, because every time they take a side in this country, the press takes a side, it's never our side. It's never the side of the United States. Have you noticed that? It's always the foreign side. It's never the side of the people of the United States. When a foreign leader is involved, as it was with Donald Trump's case, it was never Donald Trump. Read the headlines. Go back and read some of those headlines that were playing when Ramaphosa was here, where they made it look like Donald Trump had to be put in his place by this president, because Donald Trump was, in fact, according to the media, coming off racially in his treatment of the South African president. Donald Trump is the only one standing up to what's going on in South Africa, where the rest of them have not done what Donald Trump was doing, and there was no context for what Donald Trump was doing. So it looked like Donald Trump was out of place in the way he talked to Ramaphosa. But if you notice what Donald Trump did, he played a video of a person in South Africa that is really, really spreading flames in that country. And that person is Julius Malinga, who is a peripheral member of the ANC. But the ANC, you see, that's another little game that's being played. They played a clip. If you were watching, they played a clip of Malinga was talking about uh, genocide. The claim is that the white farmers control all the farmland in South Africa. And you can tell that the people have not been to Africa, but you can throw a pea out there in Africa and you're going to have it. See, this idea of the farmland is the idea that farms are farming themselves. What is farmland? Farmland is only land that's being farmed. But the West is the Western media is the white farmers control 80% of the farmland, all but a little portion of it. Well, what makes farmland farmland? Land is being farmed by farmers. And one of the problems I saw when I was in South Africa was that you're taking the farmers that know how to farm off the farms and putting those that don't know how to farm on the farms, and you're getting what the result that is intended, not intended, but is intended by the consequence, not intended by the leadership that doesn't understand what it is that they're doing, which is driving the country into the ground, but doing what is intended by the fact that if you put garbage in and you get garbage out, that's intended by the consequence that you're imposing on it. Because if you put non-farmers on the farm and they are not able to farm the farm, you're creating what is happening in South Africa right now, which is food insecurity. This DEI nonsense we're doing here, they're doing it over there. Putting people on the farm that don't know anything about farming. And those of you that are claiming that this was a racial move on Donald Trump's part, understand that bringing those farmers into the country was, in fact, a Johnny come lately move on Trump's part, because the ones that invited the farmers to come into the country in Africa was Nigeria. They love to have those farmers come to Nigeria and then plant something there, because Nigeria has, well, Africa. I mean, just what land in Africa is not farmland? Only the area, the desert, and Gaddafi was changing that in the Sahara by, in fact, creating water. You know, they did a number. Gaddafi was doing a lot of things to reclaim potential farmland by a number of things that they did. For example, you would not believe this in terms of hadn't been reported, but by importing rabbits and put them in the desert, and they're digging, right? And what they're digging is they're creating, and then also the waste that they are, they're, they are refining the soil and so on and so forth, and then putting water there. They were reclaiming the soil and making it farmland. Gaddafi was dangerous to the West. So farmland, they say farmland over here, and make it appear that all the farmland is being taken up without people understanding that all the land in Africa, except that which is a desert, and that desert is both in the north and in the south, the Sahara Desert in the northern area, and the Kalahari Desert in the southern part of Africa. With the exception of those two areas, all the land in Africa is farmland, but all the land in Africa is not being farmed, because land does not farm itself. Farming is a skill, and the Boers, the agriculturalists in South Africa, have mastered that, and that's the problem that they're going to have, because now that they're targeting the farmers, and they are targeting those farmers. I tried to warn these leaders in South Africa. I won't tell you what I think of them. and they can do all the screaming they want to. I told them, this one minister of the government, I told him to his face that they were making a critical mistake in South Africa by not learning anything from history. Go read the book called In the Course of Human Events. Go read that book. And look at the pictures in that book where in the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution, they strung up the artisan class, the ones that knew how to do things, having been in charge of the most eventful and the most, I should say, the wealthiest of the French colonies was Haiti. That's why Toussaint L'Ouverture had to confront Napoleon in 1791 because France did not want to give up its greatest colony, its most lucrative colony, which was in fact Haiti at that point. That's what that fighting was about. That's what the book is about, written by the Trinidad author C.L.R. James, Sarah R. James, who wrote a great book in 1930, don't tell me, 1939, called The Black Jacobins, who were mimicking the Jacobins in France, and now they're chopping for independence. But after having acquired it, they then turned on the artisan group, stringing them up and out of anger and things of that sort, and cut their nose off to spite their face. And Haiti is not recovered from that even today. That's what they're recovering from. That's what you are reading about when you read about the Clintons having gone over there with their criminal approach and using that as a stepping stone to siphon off money, claiming it's for the Haitian development and so on and so forth, when the Clintons were in fact using that to build the Clinton Foundation and, of course, to pocketing some of the money and things of that sort. All of that kind of foolishness is going on. But this that you had more recently in terms of South Africa and Ramaphosa, we need to understand what's going on there, because the danger is that the people are no longer willing to tolerate ANC rule in South Africa because they have 34 years of it. Ever since 1991, we really, since 1994, let's say 1994, because that's when when Mandela would have taken over. But 91 is when apartheid, the racial politics, was in fact, they got rid of it as the state policy in South Africa in 1991. And by the way, let me say this also while I'm on this point. Apartheid as a racial, I think I need to make this point. Apartheid as a racial state policy was only invoked in South Africa in 1948. And I have to make that point in order to make it clear that all this noise being made about racism, this and racism that, and some people writing as if racism is a genetic predisposition, books out like the crest theory and things of that sort. There's so much foolishness being written about because they see it as a means to an end. And they get mad at people like Jesse Lee Peterson, who makes the claim, and I support him in his claim, that racism doesn't exist. And people say, well, what do you mean it doesn't exist when you see it all over the place and we're talking about it all the time over here and so forth? What you're dealing with is powerism. And racism is used as the diversion by those who are in quest of power among all the groups that are here and so on and so forth, and even in this country and other countries as well. And it's going to be used in South Africa, and that's the danger that the whites are in South Africa, because as these groups begin to rise up, and they are going to rise up against the ANC and its leadership. Before Ramaphosa took over the power in South Africa, I can tell you that they had in there another ANC, the fourth ANC leader, Jacob Zuma, and he went out in disgrace because he had filled his pockets up. And then Ramaphosa came in the aftermath of that, and this man is now worth what, 6.5 billion rand, which comes out to about $340 million, and so on and so forth. I grant he's a businessman, but he's not a businessman that made $340 million by doing business in South Africa. Not hardly. And so this corrupt leadership you have in South Africa, which Donald Trump was in fact playing that video to show what was really going on there under Julius Malinga, was showing that, and showing that they were talking about killing those farmers and so on and so forth as a scapegoat, because racism is used as the diversionary tactic. The issue is powerism. I would even say that you can go and read the book by Lyle Rossiter, and you see where he wrote his book called Liberalism. The cycle, and the subtitle is the psychological causes. He says causes now. The psychological causes and I don't say causes, but cause of the psychological. It's the psychological cause of the mental disturbance that liberalism is. But there's not, when they say that he says causes of that, I agree that that liberalism is a mental illness. It is a mental illness. Liberalism is a mental illness. And all you got to do in order to figure that out is just listen and pay attention to those who are talking from that side of the political aisle. Name any of them. Whether it's Schiff, what's that woman's name? I'm not talking about Maxine Waters. She's out of her mind too. But this one that the ones getting all the press right now. Just listen to any of them, and you're listening to people who are mentally deranged. And it's been highlighted and chronicled in Ross's book, but Ross should not be saying the political the causes of this mental illness. There's only one cause of it. There's one cause of this mental illness, and that's liberalism. That's the cause in politics. You can listen to any of the people on the left, and you'll hear it if you listen carefully enough. Liberalism is a mental illness, and racism is its cover. And just Lee Peterson, you're correct in what you're saying, taking all this heat you're saying. But I've been on the continent of Africa more times than Gates. When I criticized, I came out against Gates, who was playing the race card some years ago. People were saying, "Well, Moss, you up here talking about Gates, and he's blah blah this, and you're that, and he's over there at Harvard and all," as if I'm scared of that. Gates is not qualified to tie my shoes. You don't hear him saying anything, do you? And they know I'm out here too, because I saw, when I came back in the country, I saw a couple of clips for this program that they're airing with the big shots. I don't claim to be a big shot, but they're airing some parts of the things we said in this program with these other things they're doing, these collages on comments being made on different shows. They added some things we said in this program here. I was surprised to see it. I don't need to see it. I don't have to see it. I don't have to feel good about having seen it. But that's the fact. They're aware. They know I'm out here. I can tell that by the people that's asking me for a friendship. One of whom is Pam Bundy. Another one is Elon Musk. Yeah, that's going on right now. I think because I think that they see that I'm uncompromising and I'm not willing to bend the truth to fit a particular ideology. I am not going to do that. I'm not going to embarrass myself by engaging in these kinds of nonsensical claims that are being made on the political stage because it feeds into a narrative that serves a certain political ideology. I'm not into that. I'm for the truth. I don't care who tells it, and I am for the truth, no matter who it is against. That's where I'm coming from, and I don't care who it offends and who it comes up against, and all the name calling, which is like water off the back of a duck, because none of that stuff sticks. I'm like the Teflon. Uh, my ideology is not in a camp. My ideology is what I consider to be the truth. And if anybody has a better truth than I have and can show me where I'm wrong and what I'm saying here, which I don't think is going to be easy to do, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's very difficult to do it. And I don't see anybody out here capable of doing it in America, particularly in the area that I'm trained in. And they don't say anything. I call about every time I get on the air, and they don't say anything. They don't. And they're not going to say anything in Africa, what I'm saying right now about Ramaphosa, because Ramaphosa is a crook, as are most of the African leaders. Carmichael, I was talking about Carmichael earlier. I'll come back to him and say this about Carmichael. Carmichael said, I'm talking about Kwame Ture. You know, he changed his name to an African name. Stokely Carmichael, you probably know him from the days of calling for Black Power in the South of the United States, where he said, we're going to stop begging and begging for integration, and from now on, we're going to say Black Power, which was waiting until King had left out of Greenwood, Mississippi. So you can't tell me anything about it, about nobody has this understanding from all these different standpoints because they don't have my training both in the classroom and outside the classroom. They don't have it. I've been told by, I won't call his name out, but I was told that by supposedly the major uh, figure that is supposedly one of the major students of the history of Malcolm X, told me he resented the authority upon which I speak because I was not over there asking him because I shine his shoes. And he had to acknowledge that when I told him a couple of things I had come up with in terms of the study in the area where he claimed to be the expert in, and I give him credit for being the one that was mentioned in that film at the end of the credits. It had his name up there, that he was one of the person that helped to calm things down in terms of the filming of the filming of Malcolm X that came out in the 1990s. They had him come in and speak to the executives because they're not going to finance that film if they thought that this man was that this film would be made about a man calling for the overthrow of their overthrow in power. Nobody's going to pay you to overthrow them. And they brought this guy from Detroit out there to Los Angeles to kind of smooth things over because they had to finance Spike Lee's film on Malcolm X. But that person that they had given the credit in that film told me when I mentioned some things to him about certain things that he had not considered, he told me that nobody ever said that before, and that's true. I don't come here to uh, play games. And I have to tell you that I'm not playing games when I tell you that Donald Trump was exactly right in what he was standing for in that meeting with Ramaphosa. The press was wrong. The unfreedom of the press, the treasonous press. And Trump was right in pointing out no funding until they clean their act up, because what they're doing in South Africa is targeting different groups. And one of them is those farmers in South Africa who are migrating out of South Africa and going into places like Australia and other places and so on, and coming here to the United States as well. And that has to be understood, and Trump is to be applauded for it. I give him a lot of credit. Okay, back from Africa, and I can tell you that you should pay attention to what's going on in Burkina Faso right now. Not so much in South Africa, but in Burkina Faso, because there's a person there making a lot of noise, and he is making a lot of impression in the continent of Africa right now, putting a lot of people on notice. Okay, I got to get out of here as always, run over time. Until next week, want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.